Deputy Adams. I'd appeal to people to stick within the time limits, please. Thanks. Thanks.
Taoiseach, I listened to the Minister of Health on RT Radio announcing the restoration of some medical cards. Now, it would have been far better if the Minister had come in here to make that announcement and to be scrutinised. But that's not the way this government works. I asked 2 weeks ago for the Minister of Health to make a statement over the appointment by him of the chairman of the West and North West Hospital Group. I asked you the same question last week. I'm still waiting for an explanation. In the meantime, this individual has resigned. And incidentally, the Minister's first response to a question from Cheachta O'Quillan was to defend the appointment, but to date no explanation whether for the resignation of the original appointment has been given to the Dáil or the public. And last week I also asked you what has happened to the original files in which decisions were made about the people's entitlement to discretionary medical cards, and which the Ombudsman says are lost.
We can only deal with one topic. On
someone from you. I'm talking about the Health Department.
We're not going through the whole Health Department and need discussion.
That's okay, but just let me say my piece, Concordia, please.
Won't you stick within the rules? I don't mind.
Okay, thank you. Please try to avoid interrupting me if you don't mind.
I will interrupt you, Deputy, if you're out of order.
Okay, go on, Margaret.
I hope you understand the rules like everybody else.
I think it's very interesting when I ask the Taoiseach a question, you interrupt me.
Excuse me, are you trying to imply that I'm defending somebody?
I'm saying it's interesting.
Are you trying to imply that I'm defending somebody?
Did you not hear what I said, Concordia?
Well, I'm listening very carefully, and I'd ask you to resume your seat while I'm on my feet.
Okay.
The rules apply in this House. You know that in leaders' questions, you're entitled to one topic. And I'm only applying the rules as they stand. Would you please adhere to them? Thank you.
The record of the Minister for Health. I'm also trying to get answers from the Taoiseach, which I've asked 3 weeks in a row. Now, the Ombudsman says that these files are missing. I raised this with the Taoiseach. Officials from his office got in touch with my office. I'm still waiting for a reply on this issue. So, coming back to today, I welcome today's announcement. And I commend those citizens who fought to achieve this U-turn. But there are questions which you have not answered, and which the Minister is not available to answer. Will those citizens who have been adversely affected through the removal of their medical cards be compensated for the hardship and the costs that they endured? Can you confirm that the administrative costs of this change will not be taken from frontline services? And given the confusion and distress caused by your government's handling of this entire issue, can you state very clearly that everyone who needs a medical card will get one? And Taoiseach, finally, isn't this embarrassing U-turn further evidence that your minister and your government is making up policy as you go along, and that the minister should go?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
I think it's a case of the extent of the impact on families being recognised by the government. Not all perfect by any means, Deputy Adams. Not all perfect by any means, and we recognise that following the centralising of this system, that the inequality in terms of the level of discretionary cards awarded was clearly, in different parts of the country, was very much higher than in others. In other words, some counties had a very high level of discretionary cards being awarded, others no. So in the centralising of that system, clearly significant numbers of families where there were children in particular who had very complicated medical circumstances were very badly stressed. I recognise that, and I've said it, Deputy Martin, I regret that very much indeed. Now, the decision made by the government today was to restore the discretionary cards that were withdrawn on review from the July 2011 date until May of this year, and that cost is 13 million. That will not be taken from, as you put it, a reduction in further services from the front line. That's a decision the government have made today, that this will be dealt with later. It's also true that during the period July 2011 to May 2014, that there were approximately 10,000 discretionary medical card holders who did not respond or who did not complete the review process, and there was approximately 4,500 discretionary GP cardholders did not respond or did not complete that review process either. So I don't know at this stage the numbers that may qualify under that particular process. The Minister for Health has no objection at all in coming into the House to give details of the individual numbers if Deputy Adams wishes to put down a public notice issue. I'm quite sure Count Corley may in time reflect on that. But it would be the important point here, Deputy Adams, that the government made a decision to restore the discretionary cards that were withdrawn on review to people who lost them, and they should have those cards returned to them in the next 4 weeks. So I think that's an issue that, as the clinical panel set up now by the Minister, will continue its work in the assessment of the medical circumstances that will allow for people to avail of medical facilities based on medical grounds. I think is an area where we all have an input in the time ahead.
Deputy Adams, 1 minute. Thank you.
Well, I see you haven't answered my question on the missing files and discretionary medical cards, or indeed the resignation of the former chair of the West and North West Hospitals Group. But, you know, coming back to this issue of medical cards, see, this was a cabinet decision. So while we think that the minister should go, mostly men sat round a table and decided upon this. And then it's explained away as an unintended consequence. Now, I don't understand that. I genuinely do not understand how, when you take a decision, the intention of to remove medical cards, that someone didn't have the wit or the social conscience to ask, what are the likely consequences of this? So perhaps, Taoiseach, you could explain how this cabinet decision, and you took similar decisions at cabinet around taking allowances away from people with disabilities and so on. There also are all sorts of confusion in terms of these figures. The minister on the radio talked about 15,300 people. You talked about 13,000. John Hennessy, the HSE Director of Primary Care, quoted the figure of 30,000. Alec White, the junior minister, talked about 50,000. And a way back, the figure used to be 80,000. So I asked in my initial question, will everyone who needs a medical card get a medical card? And then Cheannairí. This is described as a temporary decision. Could you explain that, Taoiseach? What does that mean? This decision for some medical cards being restored, being temporary. What does that mean?
I answered your question last week in respect of the resignation of Mr. Daly from the West North West Hospital Group Board, and I made the point to you that when this was brought to the Minister's attention, that the Minister was dealing with it in a very serious fashion. Yes, and obviously an issue arose regarding a conflict of interest about the awarding of a measure of work from a company associated with the former chairman. And when this was brought to the attention of the Minister, after having considered that, the former chairman resigned. And as I say, once it was brought to his attention, it was an issue that was dealt with very seriously. And I understand that Mr. John Killeen has assumed the role of interim chairperson of the West North West Board. I answered that for you last week. It's important, as you're aware, Deputy Adams, that the current legislative base for issuing a medical card is under the Health Act of 1970. And what's concerned there is undue hardship. And that's defined with reference to household means. So that when a person applied for a medical card, the question was there undue hardship based on the household means? And if the person was ruled out for the medical card on that basis, how much discretion could you then apply in order to deal with a particular undue hardship or the medical circumstances? And that began to be implemented in a very uneven fashion and therefore an unfair fashion. In other words, in some places discretionary cards were issued with very little analysis, in other cases very stringent analysis. And the equalisation of that resulted in the many thousands of people being severely affected. So what the ministers actually asked the clinical panel of people now to do is to look at the setting out of a policy framework that would take account of medical conditions as a method for having access to medical facilities. In fact, the Health Act back itself doesn't actually specifically refer to medical cards at all. It refers to the issue of access to medical facilities based on undue hardship, taking into account household incomes. So the decision of government was clear here, that all of those people who lost the discretionary card awarded to them on the basis of review centrally from July 2011 will have those cards restored on an administrative basis, and they should have them back within the next 4 weeks. That means that people who have lost a medical card awarded on discretionary grounds because of those exceptional medical issues will have those cards restored to them. The cost of that is 13 million, and the government approved that this morning.
Thank you.